Hello, Greg.
Hey, good afternoon, Keith. How
I
are you?
promised. Oh, see, already I just had a conversation about talking over each other. And sure enough, I talked over you. Hello, Greg.
How are you today, Keith?
I'm doing good. So, very interesting. I've been thinking a lot about my favorite subject, which of course is sales and marketing. And I said, we always talk about it on some level, but a lot of people ask me, people that I've coached or people I've that I have experienced me selling, like, were you always good at sales? Is this something that you learned? Did you go to school for sales? Were you trained in sales? And now the answer for me is I was not trained. I did not go to school for sales. Sales to me seemed to be part of my DNA from a very young age.
Sure.
This goes to the subject of, you know, nature or nurture. In
Hmm.
my case, it was my nature.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. My father was a salesman. Okay. My grandfather, my father's father was in real estate. So I never met him. He died in 1940. So I never got to know him at all.
Hmm.
But from what I can remember of what my dad said, or what I knew was, if you're selling real estate, I'm assuming that you had that sales gene, so to speak.
Right. Right.
So
You know what I think is interesting, Keith, is I don't know that many years ago there was a lot of sales training. I think good salespeople kind of got thrown into those roles, and it was really sort of the last area I think within business where there was really started to be training, right? There's always been training, I think, in finance and accounting. There's always been training in operational uh, excellence. But for a long time, sales kind of lagged behind, I think, in terms of the training process. Um, and I think at some point somebody figured out that, you know what, you can train people to be good salespeople or better salespeople than what they were.
yes, I agree with you. And the interesting part of when I think back to my jobs, even as a teenager, you know, I always had, as my parents would say, he's got the gift of gab.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I like to talk. I like people. I like to joke around. So part of selling is being able to communicate with people.
Absolutely.
Trying to make a connection. How do you convince somebody to do business with you? Is it because you have a great product? Well, maybe, but product is something that more often than not is a commodity that you can get anywhere. So how do I decide who I'm buying from? Well, I could tell you, if I'm selling somebody in my retail days, I wasn't going to let them find out if there was someone better. I was going to do everything I can to make sure that they bought. If you have them in your store, in your space, you have a captive audience right now. It's like you have to
Yeah.
make that sale. Now, you're not going to lock the door, although I wouldn't be opposed to locking the door and making sure they couldn't get out until they bought. But I wanted to have that connection. I wanted to make sure that, yes, they could buy, eyeglasses someplace else or whatever else I was selling at the time. But you have to make a connection with somebody in order to, you know, convince them that this is the person or the place that I want to do business. So with that, I want to ask you, I mean, look, I know your background, obviously, but I believe everything is selling. I mean, on some level, there's a sale going on. You go for an interview, sell yourself. So what is your experience in your life, even as a kid? Did you have any sales background as a kid?
No, none. And maybe that's a little quick to say. When I was when I was in college, I worked as a bartender at a golf course. And I'm not saying I was selling a lot, but there would be times when part of that job involved overseeing the pro shop, right? It was a small golf course, so it's not like we had this, we didn't have a bunch of people there working. There was the guy who ran the place, and then there'd be 2 or 3 of us working. So sometimes somebody'd have questions about what was, this particular set of clubs, and I was not trained I didn't have any training on even the products that we were selling, right? It was just, you kind of just made it up as you went along. But no, I never had any formal sales training, and I never found myself really in any roles early on in my career where I was selling. Now, I think you brought up a good point, though, that sales is a lot about selling yourself. Going to a job interview is a lot about selling yourself, right? So you have to, whether you're at a job interview, whether you're in a sales role, whether you're a business owner, I think it's important that you make a good impression on people. And as you said, you make a connection with them, right? And you don't get pushy and come across the one thing I've really noticed working with you is, you're not pushy, and you said you locked the door, but when you're in a sales situation, I can just see how comfortable you are in that role. And I think for 2 reasons. One is it does somewhat come to you naturally, but you've been doing it for a long time. You grew up with it. You've had your own stores, you've done sales training. I mean, it's just innate within you now because you've been doing it for so long. So you may not be a good example of nature versus nurture, because I think you've had both, right? Yes, it came natural to you, but now you've been doing it for so long and training others how to do it that it's become second nature for you because you've been doing it so long.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and when it comes to training others, anything you teach, you become better at. And I learned this from training in the martial arts. When you start out, you're a white belt, you know nothing. Okay, everything is awkward. You start to progress,
Mhm.
you get tested, you get your next belt level. But in the martial arts, at least in the training that I did, when you reach, I believe it was purple or green belt, which is a couple of belts before brown, you start to assist. Okay. And which means that in the system that I trained in, it's called Ryukyu Kempo, it's an Okinawan art. And we learned through what's called kata, which is pre-designated movements. You go left, you go right, but you do that over and over and over again. When you reach a certain level, you've had a certain amount of repetition. Now you start to teach. Now,
Yeah.
remember, when you teach, you have to be more perfecting in what you're doing, okay? Because somebody else is going to emulate what you do.
Mhm.
So when I started to teach, I started to pay a lot of attention. And my teacher, who was, when I started with him, he was, already, I think, second degree black belt, I would emulate him. Okay, so student teacher, same thing. So I'm equating sales training to the martial arts only in the respect that there's a proper way to do things. Okay, there's a process. Okay, now everyone in sales may have a different process, but you go by what you know to be successful. Now, I didn't have any formal training in sales. That was somewhat innate. And when I was a kid, I would ring doorbells, and shovel snow. I was so happy because I can go out and make some money.
Yeah.
And it was enjoyable to me. It's you knock on the door, would you like your walk shoveled? You smile, I'm a cute kid, maybe I'm 10, 11 years old, and they say, how much will it be? Well, it's $10. I'll do the driveway, I'll do your walkway. Okay. Funny story, someone tried to stiff me and pay me less. I started throwing the snow back after. So I was quite interested as a kid. So, but I loved sales, and I still love sales. And part of when you love something, you're enthusiastic about it.
Right.
So
That helps a lot.
right. Not only do
Yeah,
you do it enthusiastically, when you teach enthusiastically.
right.
So
One thing I see about you is you when you talk about it's almost second nature to you. You're very much an extrovert. You like people. You like being around people. That gives you energy. Right? And so you kind of thrive on that. Right? And that, like you just said, you're passionate about it. So that gets your energy level up. I think some people who are not extroverts, but are introverts, can still be good salespeople, but they just, they don't draw their energy from being around people and spending their time in conversation. But again, that doesn't mean they can't still be a good salesperson. And I think that's where the training part of it really comes in, because maybe somebody who's an introvert might be more passionate about the sales process. Okay.
right.
You're passionate about the relationship, the connection, I'll call it the intangible part of it. Somebody who's maybe an introvert might be more motivated by the tangible process, the steps. Hey, I gotta do step 1 before I do step 2, before I do step 10. I've gotten through all of them. I closed the deal, and they're excited by the fact that 1, they closed the deal, but 2, they went through this process and it worked, and that excites them and motivates them to do it again.
Yeah, so some people are very process oriented. I see you as somebody who's much more process oriented,
Right.
because that's your training. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're dealing in finance and operations and management, I mean, there's a process. You're either trained that way, okay, or it comes naturally to you. Which brings up a question for me. Did you find yourself going in the direction of finance and becoming, a CPA and eventually CFO because of you were more, in tune with process? You really enjoyed that kind of thinking?
Yeah. The process, the analytical, the logical, that finance to me, and even in operations, it always seemed like there was a a finite answer to get to, right? And maybe not a case of there always being the right answer, but there always seemed to be the best answer to come to, right? And going through that again, logically, analytically, it just made sense to my brain, and it's something that that is something that I know when I was younger, I really took to, right? Like in school when I was young, my favorite classes were math and science, and I didn't like language and English and speech, right? I didn't like those classes at all.
You know what my favorite class was?
Which one? What was it?
No class.
Skipping.
Yeah, no class. No, so I wasn't a good student. I had a very short attention span, which I still do to this day. Because I was very much goal oriented. If there wasn't something that one caught my attention immediately, and that it wasn't something at the end that I saw valuable, I couldn't really enjoy it or get into it. So if there's something that, okay, here's the task ahead, okay, I would get excited. When I decided to become an optician, okay, and I was working for, at the time, my girlfriend's brothers-in-law, I had a goal. I knew, because in my mind, oh, I'm going to marry the third sister, and I'm going to be in the business with them. So I had a vision. Okay, this is what happens for me. A lot of times, sometimes I'll call them delusions, not just visions. But but having a vision always got me excited. Okay, sometimes too excited because I wanted to move very fast.
Right.
But nevertheless, I had a goal, and I was going to school for that goal. Okay, I was going to, get my license, and I knew I had a job. I knew I could grow into management and eventually, hopefully, be a partner and then open up more stores. Well, I did achieve those goals, but on my own, without that. I broke up with the girl, or she broke up with me. I don't remember. But I still was in business with them even after we stopped dating. So we had a business relationship, and I loved business. It was my first taste of it. And I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So sales, led to marketing, entrepreneurship, and obviously over a long period of time, I've learned a lot. But I still think it comes down to that for me, it was in my DNA. For me, it's like again, I'm going to go to sports, which is our favorite subject when it comes to analogies. When someone is talented, from a very young age as an athlete, because they're better than everybody in their age category.
Right.
You don't know where it's going to go. I mean,
Right.
Both my kids were good athletes, but my youngest son was a better athlete in like baseball. He was a pitcher, and he was talented. Certainly he was like the best for his age as a pitcher. You don't know where it's going to go. You want to nurture that. So there's,
Right.
And with me, there was nobody nurturing me in sales. There was always something to sell, because I understood instinctively, I understood that there was always a sales component to life, whether it was from a business perspective, whether it was from a relationship perspective. You ask a girl out on a date, you're selling. You
Absolutely.
told themselves, is there a physical attraction? Is there, an emotional connection? Is he or she funny? Do they have a great personality? Those, and that all comes with selling. So I've always taken the position that life is one big sale. You're always selling. Okay. And I don't mean that in a way that you're trying to get over on somebody, but
No.
you have to have some type of connection in everything you do. So obviously I'm quite enthusiastic when I talk about sales, but see, what's interesting about me is I'm not terribly organized in a lot of areas. I'm like, you look at my computer, I got 50 tabs open, but I'm very methodical in sales. Now, part of that is just, again, my natural ability, but also I've learned through repetition and experience that this is what works. I don't just like when someone would walk in the door say, all right, what are we doing today? Yeah, I got the sale on these glasses today. And no, if it was the first time meeting them, nice introduction. How are you today? How did you hear about us? Oh, I saw your ad in the penny saver. Oh, Mrs. Smith, told me you guys are great, that kind of thing. I get to know them. I don't get into the whole sales mode. I do have to get there eventually because they didn't walk in the door to order a cup of coffee. I knew they were
Right.
there, something related to their eyes.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go to that level, but one, do they have a prescription? Are you looking to have your eyes examined? And then it goes into the follow-up questions. Again, that's all learned stuff.
Yeah.
That's, I learned the business because I worked in the business. So
You may not have had formal training, Keith, but my impression is you had enough kind of sense of the fact that you wanted to get better at this. So you were maybe more self-taught. You had enough kind of a good enough ability to sort of look at what you were doing and saying, what, there's some techniques that work better than others. So you refined your skills over time. And maybe you didn't do that in a classroom or by watching videos or reading books. I don't know, maybe you did. Maybe you did some of that. But somehow you managed to, again, improve your skills. Although they came naturally to you, you also improved your skills over time.
yeah, so yes, a lot came naturally to me, but a lot of it, although I didn't have formal mentorship, I did have a job. I worked for these, an optician, two partners. One was an optician, one was an optometrist. One makes the glasses, one examines the eyes. Very personable. Okay. I mean, we clicked in that area. So I got to see early on that they had that connection with people. People liked them. People referred people to them because they liked them. People came back because they liked them. So in business, it's very much about who you do business with. Because I have to tell you, you could buy the same product, I said earlier, from multiple places. But when you have a bad experience, it's usually a bad human experience.
Right.
Person was nasty to me on the phone. They didn't call me back. I had to call them 5 times to get, an answer. Or I had a problem. They didn't want to solve it.
Right.
I just said, sorry, you bought the product, it. So those, I mean, logically to me, I didn't need training in those areas. Logically, I understood there was right and there's wrong.
Yeah.
You treat people right, chances are pretty good they're going to buy from you, and they're going to continue to buy from you.
Yeah. I think you're connecting kind of the whole sales to now service, right? So it's one thing to sell something to somebody, but then, as you said, there were situations where folks weren't happy. Something happened that caused them some dissatisfaction, and you didn't just slam the door on them or hang up the phone on them. You wanted to hear what it was because you wanted to make that right, and that connects your ability to sell more in the future because you're providing customer service that people are impressed with. Right? Sometimes taking those dissatisfied clients and customers and turning them into satisfied clients is the best way you can build your business.
Yes, I innately understood lifetime value before I even knew the term. Okay, because I just very quickly, in your head if someone's gonna, buy something and their average sale is, X, and they buy every, X amount of time, you just extrapolate over a number of years and you have a customer that's, it's like an annuity. I mean, you just know that, okay, here's why my business grows. Because every 2 years, my customers, from the time they came in the first time, are going to come back. So you just multiply that out. Every year you have X amount of new customers. The next year you have a certain amount of, I mean, I'm not a finance guy, but
when you started saying that, that's where my mind went, was thinking, oh yeah, that resonates with me, right?
Yeah.
From a selling standpoint, that's the logical, analytical part of it that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. But
Correct.
Keith, I'm always surprised by how often I see businesses that don't recognize that. They dig their heels in. They feel like like you just said, like they're willing to let customers walk away, whether it's a physical walk away or from their, from their online presence, and they let them walk away dissatisfied. And it's brutal what that does to a business, because in today's day and age, there's so much emphasis put on reviews, and people are quick to go post on social media when they've had a bad experience. I just don't understand that, and that's something, whether that's innate or whether it's taught, you need to learn it quickly as a business owner and as a salesperson.
So that's where training is real important, because you don't have to train somebody to close a sale better than somebody else. But certainly in the area of sales, customer service, okay, and what it means to your own personal bottom line. If I'm a salesperson, I want that person to come to me again to make a purchase.
Yeah,
So if I can't keep them happy, or if I'm working for a company who doesn't have the right customer service philosophy, it like trickles down. It goes in the negative. So sales can be very complex to the person who doesn't have a natural, sense about it.
yeah,
But in terms of sales process, that can be taught.
yeah. Yep. I think part of it is, Keith, some folks get intimidated by it because it is a little uncomfortable if you're not used to it. It can be a lot uncomfortable. If you're not at ease talking with strangers. Most of us are comfortable talking with people we know, right? But when we meet somebody for the first time, it can be a little, intimidating, and sometimes you can get flustered during the process, right? Not every client is a friendly client. A potential client. Sometimes they ask tough questions. Sometimes they've had a bad experience with somebody completely different, but that comes through in their in their buying process. Your selling process, it's their buying process, right? Um, so being able to think quickly on your feet, overcome some of those objections, take the emotion out of it if the individual is getting really emotional. All of those, I think, are things like you're saying. It's great if you've kind of got a natural ability to deal with that, but you can train people. I know, because I've seen you do it. You can train people to maybe not be, 10 out of 10 on that, but you can train them to be better.
Yeah, I think everyone has the ability to get better at any skill.
Yeah,
Okay, it doesn't mean that you're going to be the best, but you want to be your best.
right.
Okay, so you don't want to fall short of what your own capabilities are, and that's where a willingness to learn and a willingness to listen is really important. So I know that it can be intimidating in terms of when you're early on in your sales career, if that's what you've chosen. But it's like, what isn't intimidating when you first do it? I mean, I don't know. If I was a doctor trained or a surgeon, I'd be kind of scared when I first started seeing patients or I first started doing surgery. So yes, you have to overcome those fears.
So you might say to me, Keith, Gregg, are you intimidated by having to, balance the books for your business or any business? And I would say no. But you would probably be intimidated by that because it's not something that comes natural to you. It's not something that you've trained a lot on. You haven't spent a lot of time doing. So you're right. We're all intimidated by things
Yeah.
we don't do a lot of, but we all get less intimidated the more we do whatever that action is.
Well, because it becomes second nature. I mean, it's just, anything you do for the first time, even if you have the skills, Like you just like approving you. I am good at sales. But there were times when I felt, uncomfortable. If I had to get up in front of a room or in a meeting, I mean, my preparation for that, going into the meeting, I knew invariably I would be fine, but I was nervous. I was worried about it. So I mean, what I learned to do over time is to be very prepared for a sales presentation. So I'm no longer in a retail environment, but I do sell, whether it's a coaching client or whether it's a product that I'm representing. I still prepare, and that's another thing. Preparation is really important.
I was just gonna say that. I think to somebody who's doesn't naturally take to sales, again, somebody like myself, preparation is something I'm good at. I like to do that. So there all of a sudden now is a skill you can teach to somebody like me as to, hey, you may not be this natural salesperson, but you like to prepare, right? You like to make sure if somebody asks you a question about your product or your service, you like doing the research beforehand to know those questions and to be prepared. Well, all of a sudden now you've kind of lit a passion under somebody who's maybe not a natural salesperson, but they can find the passion in the preparation, right? And so now all of a sudden you've made them a better salesperson because they never go into a sales meeting not being prepared.
Right, and part of that, and again, we don't have the time to go through that part, but I really preach consultative selling. Okay, and all that means is that you're there to learn. You're not there to sell. You're there to learn. Now, once you've learned, then you could go through your sales process. If you don't ask the right questions, you're going to wind up offering something they don't need. Okay, and first you're going to look stupid. I wouldn't want to deal with somebody that obviously didn't ask the questions. And then there are people who just don't listen, they just don't. So look, not everybody's going to be a great salesperson, but everyone could be better at sales if it's part of their job.
And just a final thought on that, Keith, we talked about, that this has come natural to you. You've always been sort of this a person who's gravitated towards this and had a passion for it. But a good salesperson does a lot of listening and they ask good questions. And that's not something that has to do with being an extrovert. That has to do with really more introvert characteristics, listening, really listening, actively listening, probing questions, right? Because like you just said, you don't come in and immediately go into your sales pitch with whatever it is you're selling. You want to find out what kind of issues this person has, and am I even the right person to be able to address them, right? If somebody came into your store years ago and they said they had an earache, I doubt you tried to sell them a pair of glasses because their issue was.
I actually tried to sell them hearing aids because there wasn't time. We did sell hearing aids, so.
But what a great example, right? If somebody comes in and says they've got issues with their hearing, you're not going to try and sell them, well, come on over here and look at these glasses I have. No, you're going to start asking them questions about, well, tell me more about that, right? What do you mean you can't hear at all? You can't hear certain tones or pitches, and you're going to, again, probe into their issue.
Or my probing might be nothing more than, we don't sell hearing aids here, but we do have people we refer to, because it's not uncommon for hearing and eye care to be in a related place. I had 4 of my locations had a hearing aid dispensary.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't for a very long period of time, and it wasn't very successful. So it didn't last that long, But needless to say, that's why I said it's funny that you mentioned that. But yeah, look, the point is that you keep, if you don't listen, you know, if someone came in for contact lenses, okay, and that's all they wanted, but I still tried to sell them glasses first. It doesn't mean I won't still try to sell them glasses, because that's part of my nature too. But you have, they're there for a reason, okay? Deal with the reason they're there first, okay? And then as you establish the relationship, you could then offer, say, by the way, when you buy contact lenses, we actually have a special on glasses if you're in need. But I'm saying that's part of sales process, okay? But it's knowing when to ask something that's unrelated, as opposed to just going and trying to sell somebody right away everything.
Right, right. Well, and I think, you know, think of it, if you got if you got a call from somebody, right, and you're this sales coach, this sales trainer, and they were having issues around finances, funding their business, keeping their books in order. I doubt that's a person you would try to coach on the issues they're having, or try to coach them in sales, because that's not the issue you're having. But I think you'd help them solve their problem, and you'd say, hey, the issues you're having, I can't, you know, I'm probably not the best person to help you with, but I know somebody who can help you, right? And you'd refer them. And at some point in the future, they may come back and say, you know, I need sales training. And I talked to this guy, Keith, and he actually got me pointed into the direction of talking to Gregg Johnson about, you know, coaching. And now I'm coming back for sales training. And now that person comes back because they had a good experience with you, because you didn't try to force something down their throat, and you didn't try to sell them something that you weren't, you know, that you weren't the best at. Now they're coming back later when they really do need a service you provide. And they're saying, hey, I had a good experience with you, and I want to work with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called knowing your lane and staying in your lane, because you know, too often, you know, you try to like push something because you feel that I got to make a sale today. You know, yeah, you know, I know I don't coach, you know, finance, you know, and operations, but you know what? We're a little low in the cash register, so let me see what I can do. But that goes to, you know, a level of integrity in business, and that's a whole other subject. So, but anyway, so as we end this week's session, obviously, you know, this is my passion, you know, selling. I believe that I can help anyone that wants to get better in sales, and I know for a fact, because you know, we coach each other, even though we have, you know, we coach different things. I don't try to figure out things that have to do with finance and operations. I talk to you, and on sales, you talk to me. So again, I think it's very important that as individuals, people stay with what they do best and look to become the best they can be in that area.
I totally agree. And I think, you know, as a business owner, a lot of times, especially for a small business, we are responsible for the sales, right? Because we're the business owner, and that's either a role we've chosen to take on or we have to, right? But I think you're right. There's always ways of getting better. And I think if there's an opportunity to use somebody like yourself as a sales trainer, it certainly is a good idea from a business owner standpoint. It certainly jumpstarts the process and can get somebody further along faster than if they try to go it alone.
Well, there's direct return on investment. It's something that's, you know, it's quite obvious when it's working, because
Right.
it shows in the numbers.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right, Greg, this was enjoyable as usual.
And we never seem to run out of things to talk about, Keith, which
No,
I like.
yes,
We always find topics that take us into some really valuable discussion.
no question. So until next week, Have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you then.
You too, Keith. Bye now.
Bye.